All right, so get ready because today we're diving deep into the mind of an entrepreneur as he's building a brand new business course from scratch.
Yeah, it's like we're getting a sneak peek into his thought process.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we're working with a recording of him just thinking out loud, so it's raw and unfiltered.
Super interesting to hear how he approaches the creative process.
It is. And, it's funny. He jumps from these big ideas about motivation and success to really specific examples.
Well, you know how it is. Sometimes it's those little details that spark something.
So true. And speaking of details, listeners, get ready for the chicken analogy. You'll know it when you hear it.
Oh, we'll get to that, I promise.
Can't wait. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the fundamental question this entrepreneur keeps coming back to.
The one that underpins any successful endeavor, really.
Exactly. What comes first? The groundbreaking idea or knowing your audience like the back of your hand?
Ah, the classic chicken or the egg dilemma.
Right. And our entrepreneur today, he's wrestling with this very thing.
He seems super excited about this new framework he's developing. He calls it the Endeavour cycle.
But then he pauses and you can almost hear the doubt creeping in.
Like, is this actually valuable? Will anyone even care about this?
It's that constant push and pull between pursuing your own passions and creating something that truly resonates with others.
He's trying to find that sweet spot that we always talk about, product market fit.
It's like you could have the coolest invention in the world, but if it doesn't solve a real problem for people, does it really matter?
Exactly. You have to understand your audience, their needs, their pain points.
Which brings us back to the chickens.
Oh yeah, the chickens. He uses this analogy of breeding plumper chickens.
Okay, I have to hear this. What's the connection?
So he's basically saying that to get a specific outcome like those plumper chickens, you need to figure out what factors led to those results in the past.
Interesting. So it's not just about blindly doing something. It's about making informed decisions based on data and experience.
Exactly. And in the context of creating this course, it's like he's saying, don't just create a course based on what you think is cool. Figure out what your students actually need to succeed.
Makes total sense. And you know what else I find fascinating? He keeps calling this course idea half-baked.
Yeah, and there's something really powerful about that phrase half-baked.
It is. It's like he's giving himself permission to not have all the answers right away.
To embrace the unknown and be okay with imperfection.
Which is so refreshing because, let's be real, no one starts with a perfectly formed idea.
And this is what makes this deep dive so valuable. It reminds us that even the most successful people start with messy ideas.
It's all about being willing to put in the work, get feedback, and keep iterating until you've created something truly special.
Absolutely.
It really is freeing, isn't it? Because it takes the pressure off. You don't have to have it all figured out from day one.
Exactly. It's like giving yourself permission to experiment, to play around with ideas without the fear of judgment.
And isn't that where the real magic happens? When you allow yourself to explore and make those unexpected connections.
100%. It's about embracing the iterative process.
Yeah.
That's something this entrepreneur really emphasizes.
Oh, absolutely. He's constantly refining his thoughts, making connections on the fly.
And that's what we're seeing here in this raw recording. It's like we're witnessing his thought process in action.
Which brings me to this Endeavour cycle he keeps mentioning. It sounds like more than just a business strategy. It's like his guiding principle.
Yeah, it's how he approaches pretty much everything, turning potential into tangible results.
So it's not just some vague motivational concept. He actually breaks it down into actionable steps.
Right. It's not enough to just have a dream.
Yeah.
You have to have a system to make it a reality.
Okay, so walk me through it. What does this Endeavour cycle look like in practice?
Well, he starts with what he calls taking inventory. Basically, taking stock of everything you have at your disposal. Your skills, your resources, your network.
It's like a personal and professional audit.
Exactly. You need to know what you're working with before you can start building anything.
Makes sense. So you've taken stock of your inventory. What's next?
Then it's all about what he calls optimizing inventiveness, which is essentially brainstorming, coming up with ideas, exploring different possibilities.
The fun part.
Right. But he's careful to point out that it's not just about coming up with any old idea. It's about aligning your ideas with your inventory.
So you're not just spinning your wheels on something you could never actually achieve.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between ambition and feasibility.
Okay, I'm on board with that. So you've got the ideas flowing, you know what you're working with. Now what?
Now comes the action. This is where you take those big ideas and start breaking them down into smaller, actionable steps. He uses this great analogy of wanting to be a better football player.
A football player. Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
So he's like, let's say your goal is to improve your speed on the field. You wouldn't just run around aimlessly hoping to get faster, right?
I mean, I guess not. You'd probably have a plan.
Exactly. You'd break that goal down into smaller components like acceleration, deceleration, top speed.
Ah, I see where he's going with this. You'd focus on one element at a time and track your progress.
And that's what he's advocating for in the Endeavour cycle. Set clear goals, break them down into manageable chunks, and then take consistent action.
It's like that old saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Precisely. But it's not just about taking action. It's also about recognizing the outcomes.
So you're constantly evaluating whether you're on the right track.
You got it. Analyzing the results of your actions,
Bruh.
figuring out what worked, what didn't, and what you can learn from the experience.
Because if something's not working, you don't want to keep banging your head against the wall.
Right. It's about being adaptable, making adjustments as you go.
It's like you're constantly learning and growing and adjusting your course.
Exactly. And here's the thing. It's not a linear process.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's a cycle. Remember, so once you've gone through those 4 stages, taking inventory, optimizing inventiveness, planning, and action, and recognizing outcomes,
Right.
you start again.
The cycle continues.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But this time around, you're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
You're using what you learned from the previous cycle to inform your decisions.
So it's like this upward spiral of continuous improvement.
You got it. And that brings us to another really important piece of the puzzle that our entrepreneur keeps emphasizing: motivation.
Because you can have all the tools and frameworks in the world, but if you're not motivated to put in the work, it's all for nothing, right?
100%. He actually talks about being both pushed and pulled towards certain pursuits.
That's interesting. What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think it speaks to the different types of motivation we experience. There's that external pressure, the push to achieve certain goals, maybe for recognition or financial reward.
And then there's that internal drive, the pull towards something you're truly passionate about.
Exactly. And he actually shares this really relatable story about having to cancel some coaching classes he was teaching.
Oh, what happened?
Well, he realized that he wasn't showing up with the same energy and enthusiasm as he used to.
I've been there.
That's tough.
It's tough when you're not feeling it.
And it made him realize that he was more motivated by the external factors, like making money, than by the actual work itself.
It's so easy to lose sight of what truly motivates you, especially when you're caught up in the day-to-day grind.
It is. But it's so important to be aware of those shifts in motivation because they can really impact the quality of your work and ultimately your happiness.
So true. It's like that saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think one of the biggest takeaways is to really pay attention to what motivates you. What gets you excited? What makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning?
Because when you're aligned with your passions, the work becomes so much more fulfilling.
Absolutely. And you're more likely to achieve those big goals you set for yourself.
Couldn't agree more. Now, before we go, any final thoughts inspired by our entrepreneur today?
Well, he poses this really thought-provoking question towards the end of the recording. He asks, what's the purpose of knowledge if you can't put it into action?
That's a good one. Because it's not enough to just consume information, right? You have to actually do something with it.
Exactly. So to our listeners, we ask you, what knowledge or skills have you been gathering that are just waiting to be transformed into something amazing?
Don't let those ideas stay half-baked. Share them with us on social media using the hashtag deep dive ideas.
We can't wait to hear what you're working on.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those ideas flowing.